So Saturn, Saturnito, our friend. Okay. So Saturn is always related to the older generation in the chart. So we're doing transgenerational astrology. All of the transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, are always going to be ancestral lineage. So Saturn is the first one of that because it's the least outer. So usually in ancestral astrology, what happens is the Saturn is like the grandparents. The Uranus is like the great-grandparents. And then you have Neptune and Pluto. So they start going further and further out in terms of ancestry. That can mean a couple of things. It can mean that that pattern or that problem has been circulating the family for more and more and more generations because they're outer planets in the chart. Okay, so that's one of the significances. Or it could be that that set of grandparents or great-grandparents had the issue and that's where it originated. So for instance, if we go back to mythology, Uranus was castrated by Saturn and then Jupiter sort of, honors him and reestablishes by dethroning Saturn. So Uranus could be the grandparents or the great-grandparents, and that could have been where the castration started, where the problem started, the origin of the problem. So there's a few ways to look at it. The point is that it's in the ancestry, and it's something that's going to come up. Any planet that is aspected hard to Saturn, we're going to add that archetype to it, that's what we'll do next time, and is going to create a problem. So I have Saturn square Venus, and Venus is love, Venus is the feminine. So I'm going to have something in my ancestry, obviously with marriage, because Saturn comes from my marriage house of 7th, and Venus being love, and there's money. So you're already going to know the themes just with the aspects, regardless of the sign, regardless of the house. So if you don't have someone's time, it's okay. You could still see patterns. The only thing is that, remember, with the ancestral astrology, the right side of the chart is the dad's lineage, the left side is the mom. So if you don't have the time, you're not going to know if it's mother or father, or origin, so to speak. But remember, any square or any opposition is going to cross over both lineages. And the thing is with ancestral astrology is that the families join up exactly because they have to. That's why all hard aspects cross the chart. Like an opposition. Like I have Mars in my 2nd and Moon in my 8th. So the masculine is from my mom's side of the family is at odds or fighting with the feminine on my dad's side of the family. Therefore, these aspects, these like oppositions or quincunxes, these hard aspects, are going to involve both lineages. It doesn't ultimately matter where it started. It's in you because you're both mom and dad. Yeah. But what it makes sense is that these people had to be the people that had you or had your parents or had your great-grandparents, because they're attracting, the subconscious is attracting the issue. The subconscious is attracting the theme. So this idea, and I'm not a believer in one soulmate. I don't agree with that. I think vibrationally there's a whole plane of soulmates for you. But what is being attracted is that is the issue, ancestrally speaking, that you need to work on. So you find people at that plane because the chart has to live out, because that's what needs to be worked on ancestrally. So it's not an accident. And so when I have Mars opposite Moon, as you do, I marry a transgender. So isn't it a one manifestation of Mars Moon? Just one. You have your own. But we're at odds with the masculine and the feminine. We're struggling with that particular theme in our chart. And then our partners will manifest it in a different way. You might be the money maker, and your boyfriend may be the caretaker. And that is at odds with your Cancer nature. So it's interesting from an ancestral point of view that even though your parents and grandparents and, you know, I have many clients, this is like a theme, so I wonder if it's in my thing, where they were left, like they were supposed to meet their lover at the tree and run off, or they were in love with the love of their life and the parents intervened and didn't let them. Well, that happened to me. That happened to me. I had my first marriage was an arranged marriage. So the person that I was with at the time was a person that I wanted to be with, but I was intercepted, had this arranged marriage, got pregnant, and so I saw that a lot in my Akashic Records clients, and it would manifest as illness in the person, it would manifest in somewhat of an unhappy marriage kind of thing. And what's interesting about that is that that isn't an accident. And if you look at the chart ancestrally, you realize it's not an accident. That storyline has to repeat because it has to be solved. And then finally, the scapegoat that we've talked about comes and resolves the issue. And that's the importance of the scapegoat in the family. The scapegoat is the person, that soul, this is how my guidance explained it to me, has the capacity at the soul level to take on the burden of the family to finally break the pattern, the curse, whatever you want to call it. Now, do they always live up to it? No. Of course, that person has to have that level of consciousness and desire. Like, I'm not in my family. So I called my mom the other day, a few weeks ago, and I lost it on her. Not because of her, because I had to get a catharsis. And I was telling her all this stuff about the cult. And even though ancestrally we haven't been part of cults, what we have had because of the Jewish ancestry is religious persecution. And so in this lifetime it showed up as this cult. And I was the first one to leave. I had to do that years ago. I left 15, 16 years ago now. My parents just recently left, my brother, you know. So it's kind of like the exile from Egypt for the Jews. That's the way I see it, except it happened to be from a cult in this lifetime. So you're exiling, everyone's leaving Egypt to go to the promised land. And finally, the last few members of my family, I believe, are leaving soon. So we're living out a miniature, if you can visualize that, a miniature exodus to what the Jews that we come from lived out back in the, you know, age of Taurus. It's amazing. So we live out the chart personally. My personal exodus was from the cult leader's nephew. My family exodus was from the cult. My ancestral, including my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, especially, Lord knows, my great-grandparents, was from the exodus of being Jews. So we're living out that same thing. That's why you start looking at the chart. So when I do a chart, I tell the person. I do your personal archetypal astrology, that's the personal. And I will do your familial, which are more of your parents from the subconscious perspective. And then the transgenerational, or the ancestral, is that it's the same planet, the same configuration. It's just doing it threefold. This is why Saturn is so important. How many generations did Saturn rule? 3. How many years is a Saturn transit? 28 to 30, 3 cycles. So with Saturn, you're usually looking at 3 cycles of the same thing. So in the chart, that's why one of the reasons that we are living out the Saturn, the way we're living it out, is because of the 3 generations. Right now I have Pluto opposite the moon from the death house. 15 years ago, my sister died. She was a cancer. 15 years later, I'm in this state. It's half. It's just a half a cycle. No, in Theta, 28 years ago. I'm like, not 15 minutes on right. 28 years ago, my sister showed up to me on January 4th of this year. January 5th, she died. And she showed up, and I was just something on the computer. I wasn't even looking at the chart. And she says, open your chart. And I open it, and she goes, 28 years ago tomorrow, I died. And she's like, I'm going to give you your joy back. I've yet to figure out what that is. Because this year has not been anything joyful. And I know that they have a way different timeline than we do, but I'm in the flesh, and honey, let's hurry it up.